kind of deck is this?
This is the tarot. Oldest kind of cards in the world. Pete says the gypsies brought them out of Egypt.
Hello to all the classic people that are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors. As a technical note, references and citations are listed for each show on the site at classicmovierev.com. Today on the Classic Movie Reviews podcast, we are taking on film noir Nightmare Alley, 1947. IMDb.com has this film rated at 7.8, which is pretty good. On RottenTomatoes.com, the film has 100% on the tomato meter and 87% audience approval. Not too shabby. New York Times film critic Thomas M. Pryor commented, quote, "The film is productive of its moments of shock and revulsion. There is, in fact, very little in the way of human wickedness that Mr. Power does not do as a slick-tongued carnival spieler who uses his blandishments on an amorous mind reader to obtain the secret code that once made Xena and her now whiskey-sodden husband a top-flight mentalist act. Mr. Power has a juicy role and he sinks his teeth into it, performing with considerable versatility and persuasiveness. Joan Blondell as the duped mind reader gives a good, earthy characterization. Helen Walker, playing a phony psychologist who outwits Stan Carlisle in his biggest swindle attempt, is cool and poised as the role demands. But Colleen Gray, while appealing as the innocent sideshow girl Stan is forced into marrying, betrays lack of experience and dramatic expression in her one pivotal scene with Mr. Power when she is trying to make him realize that his travesty of divine power will end disastrously." Unquote. So let's get going with this shocking Carney con man tale. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Tyrone Power played the role of ambitious Carney, Stan Carlisle, and he does a very good job. Power was first covered in The Razor's Edge, 1946. Mike Mazurki played the role of Strongman Bruno. This solid character actor was covered in The Shanghai Gesture, 1941. Helen Walker played a psychologist with a secret, Lilith Ritter. Walker was first covered in the film noir The Big Combo, 1955. Joan Blondell played Xena. Blondell was born in 1906 in New York City.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
Her family was in vaudeville, and like most of those kids, she started working at age 3. She went to the professional children's school. She worked with her parents until she was 17, at which time she began working in stock theater. She started working on the Ziegfeld Follies on Broadway. In 1929, she starred with James Cagney in Penny Arcade. Both Blondell and Cagney were cast in the movie version called Sinner's Holiday, 1930. In total, she made 6 movies with Cagney, including Blonde Crazy, 1931, and Public Enemy, 1931. However, the sexy actress never made it above second leads. Blondell spent a decade or so playing easy ladies and money grubbers. This talented actress moved towards comedies and other dramas. Her roles include 3 on a Match, 1932, Topper Returns, 1941, Cry Havoc, 1943, and A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, 1945. She was nominated for a Best Supporting Actress Oscar for The Blue Veil, 1951. She continued to work on stage and occasionally made movies such as Lizzie, 1957, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, 1957, Death Set, 1957, where she was very funny, The Cincinnati Kid, 1965, Waterhole No. 3, 1967, Support Your Local Gunfighter, 1971, and Grease, 1978, again bringing laughter to the screen. On television, she was on The Real McCoys, 1963. Here Come the Brides, 1968, as Lottie, the large bartender with the sexy voice of experience for the brides, and on Banyan, 1971. She died in 1979. Colleen Gray played the innocent Molly. Gray was born in Nebraska in 1922. After high school, Gray earned a Bachelor's of Arts from Minnesota's Hamline University. She then traveled to California and began working as a waitress before moving to Los Angeles. In LA, she studied drama and was soon signed to a contract with 20th Century Fox. They cast her in a lot of great movies, but only gave her tiny parts in films like Red River 1948, Kansas City Confidential 1952, where she did have a larger role, The Killing 1956, The Vampire 1957, and Copper Sky 1957. Never becoming a big star, Gray worked steadily in television, on stage, and on the radio. She died in 2015. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
At a carnival midway, Mademoiselle Zena, Joan Blondell, is waiting for her act to begin. A young and handsome Stanton, Stan Carlisle, Tyrone Power walks through the crowd. Zena takes a long, hard look. Stan goes to see the geek. Now, the original meaning of geek was someone who would bite the heads off of live chickens. It had nothing to do with computer skills or liking Star Wars. Stan is fascinated by the geek and how someone ends up being one. Stan is new to carnival work and is just a roustabout and carny in training. Zena has to wake her drunken husband Pete, Ian Keith, so they can do their mind-reading act. Stan is the barker that introduces the show, and Zena has treated him well. Stan is still talking about how someone can sink so low as to be a geek. Zena says a lot can happen to a person. Stan starts the show by introducing Mademoiselle Zena. Stan passes out cards so people can send in their questions. Stan takes the questions under the stage and passes them to Pete, who is still pretty drunk. Stan takes fake pieces of paper to the stage, where Zena uses wood alcohol to burn them. Below the stage, Pete writes out information on a small blackboard. Zena can then see the question through the crystal ball she has on the stage. After the show, Stan goes to drink a soda with Molly, Colleen Gray, the carnival beauty. Stan laments about Pete keeping Zena down, but Molly says they used to be big time with their mind-reading act. The pair had a code where Zena could tell Pete on the stage what the questions were by using code words. The code could be sold for big bucks. Bruno, Mike Mazurki, the strongman, comes by and he doesn't like Stan hitting on Molly, although he himself has no hold on her. The carnival moves to a new location. Zena and Stan are in a truck together. He asks Zena about the code and if they could do the old act. Pete wakes up in the back and says there's no way they would reveal the code. Pete takes a few drinks and then goes back to sleep. Apparently, Zena and Stan are fooling around. In the past, Zena fooled around until Pete left. She says she was no good without him. He had returned a year earlier and she had taken care of him since. In the new town, Zena has gotten a hotel room where they can all take baths. She has left Molly behind at the hotel. Pete goes to get a drink that Zena pays for. Zena wants to know if she could get Pete into rehab, calling it taking the cure, but Stan says it costs a lot of money. She says she is going to sell the code to get the money. Stan says they can create a new act and take it on the road. Stan goes to the hotel where Zena is waiting to do a tarot card reading for him. They get the Wheel of Fortune card.
What kind of deck is this?
This is the tarot. Oldest kind of cards in the world. Pete says the gypsies brought them out of Egypt. They're a wonder for giving private readings.
Say, they look plenty weird.
Whenever I have something to decide or I don't know which way to turn. Look, Stan, that's the Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah.
That means we're going to knock 'em dead.
Pete is missing from the reading, and Stan finds the death card face down on the floor. Zena says the card means Pete is going to die very soon. She tells Stan that everything between them is done and he needs to leave. I've been watching too much film noir, so I assumed that this was a scam she was running on Stan. Back at the carnival, Stan picks up a bottle of moonshine. He sees Pete begging the moonshiner for a drink. Stan hides his bottle in the wooden case. Pete has got a bad case of the shakes. The screaming geek stops their conversation. Pete tells that the manager didn't give the geek his bottle today. Stan reaches in the trunk and gives his bottle to Pete. Pete tells Stan that he is heading to the big time, just like he had in the past. Pete says he would be the geek if not for Zena. Pete also tells him that the geek was a big star one time. Pete puts on a demo of his old act. He talks about a barefoot boy running through the hills with a dog. Stan buys it, but Pete laughs and says it's a stock reading, as every boy has a dog.
Throughout the ages, man has sought to look behind the veil that hides him from tomorrow. And through the ages, certain men have looked into the polished crystal and seen. Is it some quality of the crystal itself? Or does the gazer merely use it to turn his gaze inward? Who knows? But visions come, slowly shifting their form. Visions come. Wait. The shifting shapes begin to clear. I see fields of grass, rolling hills, and a boy. A boy is running barefoot through the hills. A dog is with him. A dog is with him.
Yes. His name was Jip.
In the morning, Pete is dead. Stan accidentally gave him the bottle of wood alcohol from the wooden case instead of the moonshine. Stan checks the trunk and believes he is responsible. He hides the moonshine bottle. Zena takes it poorly and is comforted by Molly. Over time, Zena teaches the code to Stan, and they begin doing the code act. Molly has been helping Stan learn the code. Zena has been contacting booking agents about leaving the carnival. One night, the cops raid the carnival and try to arrest the manager for cruelty to the geek and Molly for indecent exposure. Stan puts Molly in a special chair where she conducts electricity. Stan starts doing a reading on the lawmen. He gets him on carrying a lucky charm. Stan tells the sheriff that someone near him is jealous of his ability and there is an obstacle between him and the woman he loves. The sheriff buys the act and leaves without causing trouble. Stan and Molly meet out back and start kissing. Molly says they shouldn't because of Zena, but Stan convinces her they are just friends. Molly is really happy that Stan wants to take her along when they leave the carnival. Stan and Molly head into town for food and a good time. The pair meet the rest of the carnies at a restaurant. Bruno comes in and he is hot with Molly. He catches her in a lie and everyone knows she's been with Stan.
Uh-oh.
That's what I say.
Huh? Oh, what's the diff? She's here now, isn't she? And by the way, Bruno, where did you run off to when all the trouble started,
Look, mister, you're not talking to that hayseed cop. You're talking to Bruno, savvy?
And when you get through with them, there's a couple of questions I'd like to ask.
Bruno and the others force Stan and Molly into a shotgun wedding. Stan realizes that it is time to leave the carnival. He and Molly can do the act using the code. Under the name The Great Stanton, Stan and Molly take the act on the road and are top performers. An older man, Ezra Grindle, Taylor Holmes, begins to fall for the act, but psychologist Lilith Ritter, Helen Walker, tries to trick Stan. She is unable to do so.
Now, will you read the lady's question?
The question is, do you think my mother will recover from her present illness?
Is that correct? What is your answer?
I'm afraid a truthful reply to that question will appear rather strange. I don't know whether I should answer it or not.
Why?
I get the impression that the lady's mother has been dead for some time.
Later, Stan goes to Lilith's office. She reveals that Grindle is one of her patients. Lilith is fascinated by the way Stan can read people. She tells him to call at her apartment. After Stan leaves, it is revealed that Lilith records all of her sessions on phonographic plates. Stan pops back in and surprises Lilith. He tells her that the collection of records from Chicago's elite could be very valuable. She throws him out. One night after their club act, Zena and Bruno are waiting in Stan and Molly's room. Stan is hostile. Zena reads the tarot cards for Molly and says she will not be having a baby this year. Zena tells Stan that he is making a mistake if he pursues the changes in his act he is thinking about. He is planning on becoming a spiritualist, but Zena doesn't know that. Zena flips the hangman card on Stan, and it's the same card Pete had. Stan gets insulting and throws the carnies out. Zena comes back to get her cards, and the hanged man card is on the floor. Geek noises are played in the background. When Stan's masseuse rubs alcohol on him, he freaks out. Stan runs out and contacts Lilith for a session. He tells her how he accidentally killed Pete. Stan begins using information from Lilith to tailor his show to the elites of Chicago. Addie Peabody asks a question about her dead daughter. Stan begins to say that he sees spirits. He then passes out before he can deliver the message from the spirit. He gets a ton of publicity from this act. Addie is going to fund Stan, and her friend Ezra Grindle is trying to stop her. Grindle sets up a meeting with Stan. Lilith meets Stan by the lakeshore to give him information. Stan tells Lilith that he crushed Grindle with the information she provided. Stan told the name of Grindle's 35-year-old dead true love, Dory. If Stan can show Dory to him, he will buy him a radio station and a tabernacle. Stan gives $150,000 in cash to Lilith that he got from Grindle, so she can keep it for him. Lilith tries to take Stan to her bungalow, but he won't take the chance. Lilith sends pictures of Dory to Stan. Stan puts on an act for Molly to convince her to play the role of Dory's spirit. Molly doesn't want to do it, but Stan convinces her, saying he needs to save souls. Molly says Zena was right and she wants to go back to the carnival. Molly warns him to stop or she'll walk out on him. Her basic problem is that he is now acting like a minister. He finally hooks her with the "I'm no good except with you" line. One night he goes out to Grindle's garden. Stan gives Grindle a very hard religious patter. Suddenly, Molly appears at the other end of the garden dressed as Dory. Grindle calls out to Molly/Dory before he falls into asking God for mercy. Molly freaks out and confesses that she is Stan's wife. Stan has to sock Grindle to get away. Stan tells Molly to meet him at the train station while he goes to see Lilith to retrieve the $150,000. She gives him a thick envelope and encourages him not to open it in her apartment. Stan leaves for the station and opens the envelope in the cab. He has been had. Lilith has only included $150 and a bunch of blank paper. He goes back to Lilith's apartment and accuses her of using the gypsy switch on him. She acts like she's been treating Stan, and his partnership with her was a delusion.
When you first came to me, you were in bad shape. I had hoped that by getting at the roots of your anxieties, I could avert a serious upset. Well, I seem to have failed.
Wait a minute. If you're thinking of throwing the cops at me, don't forget that you've been in this with me.
Please, Mr. Carlyle, try to understand that these delusions of yours in regard to me are a part of your mental condition. When I first examined you, you were being tortured by guilt reactions connected with the death of that drunken mentalist during your carnival days.
Well, what are you trying to pull? You can't prove anything. Besides, it was an accident. I told you that.
I'm a psychologist, not a judge. What I want to explain to you is, all these things that you think you have done lately, or that have been done to you, are merely the fancied guilt of your past life projected on the present. Do I make myself clear? You must regard it all as a nightmare.
Stan is beaten as Lilith holds all of the recordings. She also threatens to have him committed. When he hears the police siren, Lilith says she doesn't hear anything. Stan flees the apartment. Molly finds Stan sitting on a bench at the train station. He sends her back to the carnival. The newspapers say the police are looking for Stan. Stan lays up in a hotel room for a few days, and eventually he begins drinking. He hears the geek scream with the first drink. Slowly, he becomes a hobo riding the rails. He gives Pete's act about the dog to the other hobos around the campfire. He has lost his feeling of superiority, and even the hobos take advantage of him. One day, Stan wanders into a carnival. He asks for a job, but is told that he can't be hired because he is a drunk. The owner gives him a drink and tells him that the only job open is that of the geek. When he is offered the geek job, Stan replies, "Mister, I was made for it."
Anyway, it's only temporary. Just until we can get a real geek.
Geek?
You know what a geek is, don't you?
Yeah. Sure, I know what a geek is.
Do you think you can handle it?
Mister, I was made for it.
The first night, Stan as the geek goes crazy. Molly is working at the carnival and sees Stan. When Stan sees Molly, he calms down. She says she will take care of him. At last, he has taken on the role of Pete, with Molly caring for him as Zena did for Pete. The owner says the geek fell so low because he reached so high. I'll be right back with conclusions and the world-famous short summary following a word from our sponsors. Summary. Power was pretty great and believable in this role, but audiences still had a problem with accepting him as other than a romantic star. This was Power's second film after being in the Marines in World War II. It is likely that he had matured during the war years and was thus able to bring more to the role. Eddie Muller of TCM's Nor Alley said that grifters, con men, and fake spiritualists use the phrase, "Are you a friend of Stan Carlisle's?" Power's name in this film are a variation of that line to identify fellow criminals. Also, all shots of the geek were removed from the film, and the ending was softened by having Molly find Stan again and take care of him. World famous short summary: kick people on the way up and you'll get a chance to kick them on the way back down. I hope you enjoyed today's show. You can find connections to social media and email on the site at classicmovierev.com or in the podcast show notes. If you enjoyed this show, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you've already subscribed, you can tell a friend, colleague, or family member about the show or leave a review at Apple Podcast. It really helps the show get found. If you want to comment, suggest a movie, or help out, contact me by email at jec@classicmovierev.com. Beware the Moors.